Good afternoon. I'm Tonya Arnesen, Senior Pastor of Jackson First United Methodist Church, and this is Food for Thought for Wednesday, April the 29th, 2020. It's a dull and dreary day out there, and I confess my spirit is feeling pretty dull and dreary as well. This time of social distancing just seems to grind on and on and on. And what began as perhaps an interesting adventure that called us to be nimble and flexible in the way we do church has turned into a confusing new normal for me. All the church leadership writers are sending out the same message. The age of technology is here to stay, and the church had better get on board with it. Life as we know it is constantly changing, but there is one thing that never changes. We are called to live and speak and do the work of Christ in our world today. We are called to be God's holy people. Hear this bit of prose from Weems' book, Searching for Shalom. It's entitled, God's Holy People. Here we are, you and I, called to be God's holy people. You say you're not the holy type, but I'm not talking about holier than thou. I'm not talking about religious ritual, and the last thing I mean is self-righteousness. Jesus chastened the self-righteous, the ones who spent their days doing religious things, the ones who spent so much time in religious ritual that they didn't have time for tender-heartedness. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about paying attention to the things Jesus taught people, ordinary people, people like you, people like me. Look at the disciples, ordinary people called to follow, called to be God's holy people, called to live in this world with tender hearts, live holy lives. Impossible? Is anything impossible with God? That old woman, Sarah, thought it impossible to have a child. The lepers thought it impossible to be healed. The disciples thought it impossible to feed 5,000 with 2 loaves and 5 fishes. Mary and Martha thought it impossible that their brother Lazarus was alive. The lame thought it was impossible to talk. The blind thought it impossible to see. Here we are, ordinary people called to be the holy people of God. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, see and hear God's holiness in your life. The Apostle Paul put it this way in his letter to the church in Galatia. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, it is Christ who lives in me. Hear that again. It is no longer I who live, it is Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. That's Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. My friends, even on this dull and dreary day, Christ lives in me. Christ lives in you. And as ordinary as we may be, let us see and hear God's holiness in our lives today. I hope to see you again tomorrow at noon. In the meantime, be blessed, be well. You are beloved. Amen.